Hey everybody,
Hey,
how's it going? Rob and Andy back here after how long, man? It's been a long time since we've
well,
recorded
do you know
anything.
what it's been? Do you
What
know what it's been?
what's it been?
It's been.
It's been
You're leaving me hanging. It's been a while.
Oh, okay, yeah, it's been a while since we
Wow. But
could
that's how you
hold
know
on.
it's been a while.
I forgot the meme, yeah. So how's it going, everybody? This is our brand new show. It's called Talkin Muzak. So brief little like I guess intro here for returning viewers. So the I don't know about you, Andy, but like we had an initial vision for this show, this channel, whatever you want to call it, and that was to have a long form sort of discussion on, well, basically a podcast on music. And we've done that largely. We did it. We've done our discography series. We've done videos. I mean, sort of what we've done kind of has evolved into more of like the YouTube side of things these days. But we've done a lot with this channel and with this podcast. So obviously it's been a while. It's been a while since we have posted much or done anything really. And you and I have been talking now for months, probably over a year now, about we still want to keep this going. We enjoy doing it, and we decided to change up the format and decided to start a new show. So I don't know if you want to add anything to what I said there, but
Yeah, no. So it was something that, like you said, we've been kind of discussing and dissecting a little bit with how to approach this.
mm-hmm.
And I would say, in a way, we're kind of going back to our roots with how we
Yeah.
did originally
Yep.
envision this podcast when we started the Sound of Music YouTube channel. The idea was more with the podcast mindset,
Mm-hmm.
which, for those of you that have been following us, by the way, it's been 4 years since we've been on and off doing this thing. But the origins of this channel podcast, and that's another thing, we didn't really have an identity with it at the time.
Yeah,
It was definitely more in the vein of podcasting, and we did King Crimson discography, or rather, we went through the King Crimson discography, which is still available on all podcast platforms and
Yep.
on our YouTube channel. Please check that out. But those were like the equivalent of like Joe Rogan experience
Yeah,
episodes,
pretty
right?
much. Yeah, like 3 hours.
3 hours long. And so then we tried a different approach when we did the David Bowie discography discussion. We'll talk about that a little bit
Yep.
later here. But and then we started dabbing with other ideas, incorporated more YouTube, and we were just finally like, look, we're both busy individuals. There have just been long periods of time when I put content up, you put content up, when we put content up.
Mm-hmm.
And just finally, you were like, how can we come up with something that is tangible in our day-to-day lives, but that we could consistently put out on a regular basis? And that's kind of how we came to this, more or less.
Yep. And to add to what you just said there, and also encapsulates all the things that we want to do, because we've talked off camera and off mic about lots of ideas we've wanted to do, and we've dabbled in a bit of those things. We've done a few discussion videos. We've done, we did that rant video. We've done like top tens and things like that, both individually and collaboratively. But we really wanted to, we were basically, as my grandpa would say, getting too big for our britches, because we had a lot of stuff we wanted to do, and we kind of just thought we'd have more time to do it than we did. I have another channel. I have 2 kids. You're a busy man with a job and a wife and everything. We're both busy people. And it wasn't feasible. So what my idea was to, why don't we come up with a format where we can just cram all that in an hour-long episode. So, my good people, we present to you Talkin Muzak. There you go. Our new podcast, our new show, our main show. We may do other things on the channel and podcast side of things separately, but in terms of, the original, as you said, core idea of what this channel and what this podcast was supposed to be, this is what we want to focus on. We want to do this formatted show where we have several different topics that we can discuss, different segments. So we're going to have top tens. We're gonna do discussions on albums or bands. You know, we may have people come, like we had our friend / my brother-in-law Dan guest for as an example on the podcast. So we may have guests that will come eventually and talk with us about music, or who knows, maybe musicians. You know, you never know in the future, but we may do that. Well, so basically what we want to do is we want to have one show to just be able to do whatever we want with and have a somewhat more organized approach to. So I don't know if you want to add to that.
Absolutely. And just to add to that, and I guess reiterate too, Rob already mentioned we'll continue to put out solo content. I do the Journey Through Muzak series, which has been, again, pretty spread out.
It's been a journey.
But that's something like you can, and it is a journey. Indeed, it is a journey, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that I still continue to plan on doing. Check those out, by the way. So far, I've got the top 10 of my favorite records released in 1965, 1966, and 1967. So that will still continue. We'll continue to do things individually, but this will sort of be the main shtick moving forward. And to clarify the identity, this is indeed a podcast, Talkin Muzak. It will be available in video format on YouTube, as well as the big podcast streaming platforms as well too. So again, I just want to reiterate that. And that's what this is going to be. Sound of Muzak YouTube channel will continue to be up. That's sort of the overarching, if you will, of this madness that we do.
Yeah.
Talkin Muzak is a podcast that is part of the Sound of Muzak network, if you will.
Yeah.
Definitely felt like a mouthful. But yeah, I think that just about covers it. We will ask, just bear with us, guys, because these first few episodes are going to be kind of us figuring this out, working the kinks out. I think I don't know if we want to get ahead of ourselves, but do we want to point out that we're just starting this as a monthly thing? Yeah,
we're going to start this as a monthly thing because we're both busy, and we're hoping that we can eventually move to probably not weekly, but a bi-weekly thing would be awesome. You know, but for now it's going to be a monthly show. There is a lot of prep that goes into this, and it's going to be, we're going to stick with the hour format. It may go over. It may even, I think we talked like 90 minutes would be like the absolute max. Yeah. But for the most part, we're trying to stick as close to that hour mark as possible. So hopefully it's a bit more digestible for everybody. And it's also just easier for us to be able to actually fit the time in our lives to record. I do want to really quickly just explain to everybody, because this is the first episode and this is the introduction to the first episode, how the show is going to be structured going forward. So this time here in the very beginning of the episode that where we're just explaining this for the first episode, we're going to basically dedicate to a segment called Heavy Rotation. So we're going to be talking about albums or bands, music, whatever we're listening to the most at the point of us at that point of us recording the episode. So, you know, whatever I've been listening to all week, or what you've been listening to all week, or the last month, or whatever, we're going to talk about that. We may talk about new releases, or we may talk about if a musician passes away, or if there's some really big news in the music world, something like that. The first, I would say, about 10 minutes or so would be probably of our show is always going to be that. I think it's just going to be sort of like a, you know, what's happening right now with music that we want to talk about, right? There's always going to be about a 30-minute segment in the middle, which is going to be some kind of discussion, whether it's a long-form discussion on a specific music topic or a band or something like that. Or if we do have a guest, they'd probably fit in that half-hour slot or something. We don't know yet. Or we may even do a, you know, we've done stuff in the past like the discography series. We may end up, say, finishing, you know, the Bowie discography series in that slot, or doing something similar, or going through a band's, like a mini band's discography or something, you know. Basically that half-hour slot, that big chunk in the middle of this show, is going to be the meat of the show, I would say. Do you have anything to add to that, Andy, or?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, and then otherwise,
Summarized it quite well.
the other segments are going to be kind of shorter, probably max 10 minutes, minimum 5 minutes. We're probably always going to do a top 5 because everybody loves lists. You love lists. I love lists. Who doesn't love lists, right? So top 5, whatever it is, bands, albums, guitarists, you name it, anything anything you could think of that you've seen on YouTube or whatever. And we have lots of other really fun segments that we've tried to do as videos. We have a thing called Record Roulette, which we did post one video of that, which is where we'll probably pick 3 to 5 records right off of our shelf and randomly, and then talk about those records. Yep, just like you got and like I got over here. We have what we're going to do for this episode is the album swap, where we each pick an album that the other person has to listen to, that most likely the other person either hasn't listened to or maybe doesn't have much of an opinion on, or a negative opinion even. And we swap, and then next episode we talk about the albums that we swapped with each other. We'll more on that in a little bit. And I'm sure there's other segments that aren't coming to mind right now, but I would expect that you'll see these different segments that we come up with sort of vary per podcast. So we like to keep it fresh. We like to make it fun and kind of, sort of surprise people and just be really inventive and creative with what we want to do. So I would expect at least probably 3 to 4 segments, something like that in an episode. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
With the exception of this first episode.
Yeah, the first episode, this is the vast majority of the beginning of this is just explaining what the heck we're doing, so.
It's like the first day of school.
Yeah, exactly. Ding, ding, ding. Welcome, class.
But any final thoughts?
No, I think that about covers the intro.
Okay, so then why don't we go ahead and segue? So we thought when putting this new podcast together that this is sort of like the restart button in many ways, right? Yeah. So no better to restart things by kind of giving an origin story. And that's really going to be today's main conversation is how we got into music and how that had our paths crossing eventually, and kind of how it brought us to where we are today. So do you want to go ahead and get started on Mr. Curran's origin story? Sure.
So for new listeners, which is I assume will be most people, but I'm Rob, everybody. That's Andy. He's over there.
Oh yeah, I'm Andy.
On the other screen. Hey, and so I mean, it's an interesting one, I mean, everybody has their own, I guess, moment where they first heard a song or they heard a band or whatever, and it just clicked, and that was it. I have to say, for me, when I was growing up, I was not a music fan. I was actively not a music fan. Almost an anti-music person. Not anti-music, because I don't think anybody is. But I was a big gamer growing up as a kid. I still love video games. And the only music I'd ever really listen to would be like video game music. Now, my family were big on country music, which I've grown an appreciation for in later years, but couldn't stand as a kid. My mother used to listen to like soft rock station, like Delilah. You remember her? It's your parent? Okay, you yeah, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, it would be like the '90s soft rock, Shania Twain, Celine Dion, stuff like that. And it's like, while I don't think any of that's like terrible music now, it was all I would hear, like the same songs over and over. My mom would play, and I just didn't like it. And then, there was older country my grandparents would play and stuff. And I don't know why my dad was a huge fan of music, like enormous fan of music. He just never played much music around me as a kid. I don't know if it was because I spent more time with my mom because my dad worked and stuff, but it wasn't until one night my dad was I was sitting in the living room on my computer, and my dad, I was about 13, 14, something like that. My dad said, he's like, you can get any kind of music on there? Because he didn't really understand computers. And I said, yeah. And he goes, put in Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. And that was it. I heard Dark Side of the Moon, and my life pretty much changed from then on in. And then he told me about Queen and David Bowie and AC/DC. And, I eventually heard about Led Zeppelin and The Who and bands like T-Rex. I could go on and on with a lot of our classic rock favorites. And I'd not really heard, believe it or not heard a ton of rock and roll growing up. Aside from the Beatles, my family were all, or my dad's side of the family were all big Beatles nuts, so that's the exception. And I always liked the Beatles. But that was what kickstarted me off on music, and I became obsessive about it, as I tend to be towards a lot of things. And that's kind of what happened. I started discovering bands on my own, albums on my own, and I realized there was this big wide world of music that I never had really had my ears open to. And then eventually, you know how it is. A lot of people our age start out with those big classic rock bands and then kind of go from there because their dads listen to them, or their moms, or both of their parents, or whatever listen to it, and that was the stuff that they grew up on. So I found prog rock, and then I found experimental music, and then you find stuff like, I'm sure you found like jazz through some bands, and you find folk and even rap and stuff later on, So that was kind of it for me. And there was also just a general disdain, which I didn't mention, of most popular music growing up. So for me, it would be like the late 90s, early 2000s, which it would be like a lot of boy bands and then a lot of rap, which I'm since now I'm getting into rap. I like it, but I wasn't a fan of it at the time. And so none of that clicked with me. It wasn't until I heard Led Zeppelin or Pink Floyd or the Beatles or whatever that I was like, wow, I can identify with this music. So that was sort of my origins.
Nice. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of similarities with my origin story into getting music, and with yours too, which I think is really interesting, especially when we consider how we eventually crossed paths. But yeah, it's interesting because I had a lot of fun really looking back and thinking about just my life in music. And music is always been something, for as far back as I can remember, something that's just meant not only the utmost importance to me, but really just has gotten me through life.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is my love of music listening and nerdom, as far as that goes, that didn't happen until a little later in life. So I was a little nerd in school. I was always in band and choir and all that stuff. I took singing lessons growing up. I played the saxophone. I played the clarinet. I played guitar eventually. I was in music competitions. And it's interesting because, so I just got married a few months ago, and you were at my wedding.
Of course.
And we made a CD mixtape, and I wrote the liner notes for that. And when I was writing about the one song that I picked for my mom, that I dedicated to her, it made me realize that my mom is definitely where my love for music comes from, but not her musical tastes.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I've always had, Mom, if you're watching this, I love you, but I've always, let's just say we've never seen eye to eye.
Yeah.
On a lot of music. My mom loves Broadway tunes. She loves a lot of AM soft rock music,
of course,
from the 70s, from her time period. A lot of that Delilah crap. But there was one band that my mom loved that has always kind of been the band that I always associate with my family, is the band Queen.
Yeah.
Which there's some irony there, being my last name is King. But I remember listening
Never
to
thought of
Queen,
that.
whether it was on the radio or the first CD I ever bought was that red Greatest Hits,
right?
Greatest Hit Volume 1. And so that's really where my music listening started, in conjunction with getting my first iPod. Rob and I are the iPod generation. And I think there's something to be said for that. The iPod is the greatest piece of electronic that is no longer in use.
Well, especially when you go from burning CDs, which was also cool. Burning CDs and stuff was cool, but the iPod changed everything. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, it really did. It was a total game changer. And where my tastes in music started to expand was around age 13, 14. As I like to put it, I received my classic rock starter kit. My friend Kevin, mutual friend of ours, his father had a stack of CDs that consisted of Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd,
Yep.
the Beatles, U2, I believe Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers was in there, AC/DC, so on, so on. And so I suddenly just had this stack of music to burn on my new iPod Classic to listen to, and I just dived deep into all of it. And that was right around the time where I started to buy CDs consistently as well, too. And it's kind of a little funny to look back at that hindsight, because here we are with vinyl records that are, you know, we actually use, right?
Yeah.
It's more tangible than anything else, but CDs really served the purpose to just burn onto our iPods.
Oh, yeah,
and then they collected dust on the shelves after. So that's where I started, similar to you, classic rock, right around high school, and kind of same too, I really just wasn't connecting with a lot of what was popular at the time. You know, we're talking the early to mid 2000s, with notable exceptions with things such as My Chemical Romance and The Killers and System of a Down. I just was not really connecting with a lot of what was, you know, popular at the time. And so that's where things kind of started for me. Eventually, you and I kind of crossed paths in high school, and I know we had a tremendous influence on each other's musical tastes.
Yes.
I specifically remember really getting into Rush for the first time together with you, Genesis, King Crimson, to just name a few, and I know there are so many more, which then eventually led me down to the path of heavy metal and starting to discover things that were a little bit more on the heavier side. Remember, the record Sad Wings of Destiny by Judas Priest was the first heavy metal album I bought on CD, and that just opened a whole world of new things to check out that tied back to Led Zeppelin, that tied back to some of the other hard rock that I was listening to at the time. And like now I was discovering Metallica and Black Sabbath and all these other bands, and which led me to really my first favorite band, which was the band Dream Theater.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Dream Theater at the time, for me, you remember my Dream Theater obsession.
Oh yeah. Years.
Literally captured everything I was into up to that point.
Yep.
Heavy metal and progressive rock music. And then I just remember, as we started going CD shopping together, record shopping together, going to each other's houses, driving around, listening to music, I remember getting to this point around 19 where I was just starting to really get sick and tired of the same music that we were all listening to. And I remember, on top of that, our local radio station, 103.7, just always playing these same 20 artists or so, and the same 5 or 6 songs by said 20 artists. And that's right around the time when I discovered the website rateyourmusic.com. A site that I still use, a forum that I still use religiously to this day. And I was just starting to discover all this other music that was out there. I'm not going to get into, like, you know, MU Core, you know, Fantano Core, the Needle Drop, and all of that necessarily, but I was drawing from a lot of those sites, even a little bit of Reddit here and there, and just coming across all these bands, old and new at the time, and my world just shifted. Like, I remember hearing the Velvet Underground and Nico for the first time and thinking, this band, they're contemporaries with the Stones and the Beatles, but this is just so different. And reading up on them and seeing, hey, they're pulling influences from Stockhausen and John Cage, but also pulling influences from the blues and, you know, folk that was coming up. I remember the first time hearing Radiohead's OK Computer and reading about how they tied back to the Velvet Underground, but how they were also pulling influences from Apex Twin, and then just all these rabbit holes after rabbit holes.
They lead to rabbit holes, lead to more rabbit holes. That's how it always goes.
Absolutely. and by my early 20s, I was just really getting into more experimental forms of music, whether it be experimental rock, avant-garde classical. This was also really when my world of jazz was starting to expand. So free jazz was coming into play, jazz fusion, and all that rock stuff was just like, this is nonsense. This is beginner's music, and just went through this phase of I was too cool to listen to that stuff. And then my mid-20s, I met my wife, girlfriend at the time, and I started kind of going through this 60s pop revival. It's when I really was getting into the Beatles for the very first time. Always was a Beatles fan, but just all of a sudden had this epiphany that the Beatles were just everything that I loved in music, and then getting into the Beach Boys and really diving into that. And, you know, you get to a place where you start to kind of cool your britches a little bit with some of that, you know, lame classic rock stuff you listened to as a teenager, and that starts to get reintegrated again.
Yep.
And now at the end of the day, it's good music or bad music is what it comes down to.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I totally agree.
Yeah.
I wanted to back up a little bit about the what you were saying about us crossing paths. You know, I think it's very much worth mentioning. First of all, our mutual friend, my brother-in-law Dan and Matt, they were hugely influential on both of us too musically, and we were hugely influential on them musically. And they were the two that we really palled around with and would go buy CDs, God, every week. I mean, we were, you know, Dan and I were a little older, our early 20s. You guys were in your late teens, coming out of high school, and we would go to the mall like literally every Saturday and just like totally blow our paychecks on CDs, which no regrets. I just wish it was vinyl. but no regrets because of all the great music that we discovered. But yeah, I really wish it had been vinyl because I'd have an amazing vinyl collection now. But that aside, and also you and Matt had a separate friend group that would always hang out at your house, who you'd call the Pine Street Crew, and they were also very, very instrumental, pardon the pun, on influencing as well with music. Everybody, we all would get excited about like exchanging music, and there was like a pool of bands that it seemed like everybody loved: Rush, Iron Maiden, you know, Black Sabbath, Rainbow, Deep Purple, Pink Floyd. You know, there were those like big bands that we all just loved. You know, and so like a lot of that crossover happened, and you're right. You know, you and I specifically, probably more than anybody, got really deep into progressive rock. You know, I know a lot of the other guys do appreciate a lot of those bands, but you know, I mean, that was, you know, still progressive rock being one of my biggest, to this day, biggest genres. I mean, I love progressive bands, and that was a big moment for me. You know, discovering bands like King Crimson and Genesis and Yes, all of those, and like you said, heavy metal was around that time, and lots of other things. You know, later on, you know, I would, you know, another sort of crossover genre for us is krautrock. I mean, you got a couple albums behind you there. I mean, krautrock was introduced to me by a guy at work, Sebastian. If you ever watch this, Sebastian, I always reference him because he was humongous in stretching my boundaries more. Gave me more of an appreciation for experimental music, and he told me about bands like Can and Amon Düül and Kraftwerk and Popol Vuh, and you know, name the huge list of krautrock bands, you know, as well as other like avant-garde music. So it's you know, your tastes change over the years. I'd say for me, my journey has been different than yours. I think for me, I always do go back to the roots. I do still love a lot of those same bands. Not that you don't. It just seems like you kind of went away and then came back a little bit to some of them. But I still have those bands. I also stopped listening to the radio years ago, so that helped me. You know, but you know, it's nice that, you know, over the years, you know, you and I also for a long period of time, probably a few years, didn't really talk much. So it was interesting when you and I started talking more again, you know, probably a few years ago after you'd gotten sick. and we started reconnecting on music, and it was interesting to me that it seemed like our tastes changed a lot, but also in some ways we still had a lot of crossover and stayed the same. And it's like, oh, I can talk to Andrew about all these same bands still, you know, and I like, and it's, we know each other, you know. I'd say you and probably my brother-in-law Dan are the two people that I know, like I kind of know what, more than anything, if I hear a record, like they'll like that, you know, Andrew will like this, or Dan will like this, or, you know what I mean? It's, and yeah, and I guess I would say Matt too, Matt, if you watch this, but like definitely you guys, there was a lot of, and going back into the whole, this whole sort of idea of like what music means to me. It's kind of like, well, you know, there's nostalgia for hanging out with you guys and discovering those tunes when I was young and angsty and unsure of myself and trying to discover who I am, and a lot of that music meaning a lot to me and still meaning a lot to me, but also, you know, the friendships that we cultivated centered around this thing called music that we all bonded over. So that part of it means a lot. And there was also just I'm sure you feel this way. There's also just the idea of, you know, I think everybody with music, it does become sort of part of their identity if you're a big enough music fan. So, you know, I mean, there's those bands where, you know, they're just your own, or there's very few people you can really talk about those bands with, but then when you do, it's like you're in the know together, and it's like this cool secret you guys have, you know. It's interesting, you know. So yeah, and also, I mean, I think you'd probably say the same thing, because you know, music got me through some really tough times and some really good times, so there's the emotional connection there as well, right? So that's
and that might be above all else my favorite thing about it, is that emotional piece, and how I connect a certain record or artist or even concert to said emotion, and it can be positive or negative. It could be funny. Like I was just thinking, listening to you talk about, you know, your musical beginnings of that time before you and I were really buddies. You were at my house with Matt, and I remember you asked to look through my iPod.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, again, just getting CDs, borrowing other people's CDs. It was just like, just to get anything to load up on my iPod. Right, this is before we still had streaming and smartphones. And I remember specifically you pointed out Green Day and Asia of all bands, which is funny because you're a big Asia fan.
Yeah, I do like it. Well, I'm not a big fan, but I ended up later, kind of liking Asia. Yeah.
I remember you'd be like, ugh, you have Green Day. Ugh, you have Asia. I can't look at that. But, you know, it's funny because then I think about how, you know, Dan and I met up, and I remember that first day of school or junior year, he had Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon t-shirt. I had Pink Floyd's The Wall, and just, you know, connecting over that. And that's right around, again, when you and I became friends then. And of course, there's always in our group the infamous first time we saw Rush and that whole story. And I guess just the point I'm making is just the memories, certain memories, many memories in my life are associated via music, and I really don't know any other way of going about that other than incorporating music, among many other things. But with like, just when I think about the past and I think about all these, you know, things that have happened, one way or another, it's always going to get attached with music. Right.
Yeah. I completely agree. You know, you're always, like, to me, I've, since I was whenever that fateful moment was, I was 13, 14. That was the other thing, when I first got into music, I had just entered high school, so it was quite an impactful moment for me getting into music. But my point was, since I was first entered high school, and I was 13, 14 years old, I've listened to music regularly. I mean, it's waxed and waned in terms of variety and how much I listen to music, but I've listened to it consistently since I was 13, and it's I'm 35 now, and it's like I can always associate any song, unless it's a new song, and then eventually, obviously, I associate it later on with something, but I can always associate music with some time in my life, and it's funny. It's almost like it's become my own personal journal in a way, because it's like I can't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday. I can't remember to shut the door and lock it sometimes, but I can remember that I was listening to Farewell to Kings when I was about 21 years old, driving in the middle of the night and angsting about some things, and hearing like Cygnus X1 at 3 in the morning while I'm driving down a dark road. Just like I remember stuff like that. So it's like, I can it's like it's like my own personal journal, or whatever you want to call it, just way of identifying time in my life. And sometimes it's an association with bad things, but like even if it's associated with a bad memory, it doesn't reflect negatively on the music to me, because the music is what got me through that bad time. So it's, if anything, it's a way of being more reflective on that moment, I suppose. So
absolutely,
that's also
absolutely. You had mentioned before, when we had reconnected, and I believe right around the time when I did get sick, and that was such, like, even reflecting and looking back at that moment of my life, that was rock bottom. But when I think about that time, I think about the music of REM, and I was just getting into REM before all that stuff happened, and that music was just what was comforting for me. So, while that experience is a very negative experience, like you said, I don't have that negative connotation with REM's music in this case. It's literally the exact opposite. It was their music that got me through that thing.
Yeah, it's like, thank God for that, right?
Had that, exactly. It's like, had I not had that, who knows? But yeah, absolutely. It literally, music for me, just it marks all the emotional checkpoints, and it's just kind of a matter of one said emotion is needed to be I guess regulated, right?
Music can be therapy. I find, it really can. Like if I'm having a crappy day and I put on a good album, it can turn me around, depending. So it's
absolutely,
it's probably the most, aside from my family and my friends and eating food and getting enough sleep, it's the most important thing. And I even put it in the same category as the other two, because if I don't listen to music at least a little bit in a day, it feels like something's missing. To keep going with this, because just keeping time, maybe we should talk about how, given all this background, how this led to the podcast for the new viewers. Like for the people who've never watched us and just discovered two sort of dinguses on YouTube or Spotify or wherever, and it's their first podcast. Like, why did we decide to do this? I'll let you start, because you're the one who initially approached me about it. So
so this is something that I've been wanting to do for years, and it's just a matter of finding the right person to do it with, and it was just a no-brainer. You were that first person. As we've alluded to, we have several mutual friends, several, friends outside of that inner circle that, I know, like, I bond and talk to music about, and same with you. But you have always been, like, probably my favorite person to talk to music about.
Oh, thanks, man.
And, I think about all those many car rides and phone conversations and just hours and hours, and like you were saying, CD record shopping. And so, first and foremost, I guess it was selfish reasons. It was an excuse to just talk to you about music.
Mm-hmm.
But also just to kind of stay connected with what we were currently into, and having those conversations, having those debates. Maybe you like this record more than I do. Well, why is that? Why don't I like it? Why don't you like it?
Yeah.
And So that's just really kind of what that comes down to for me more than anything else. Ultimately, it was just a excuse to just on a regular basis talk to music.
Yeah.
About someone, if I'm just being, bluntly honest here. And I have to say, it's, the many configurations of what this is, where it's going moving forward. It's been a roller coaster, man. It's been a lot of fun. Like, it's kind of funny. Like, we've been doing this for 4 years, but we're just getting started. And I think that's very reflective of, where I'm at with music. When we, not to get ahead of myself here, but when we get into the top 5 in a little bit.
Yeah.
My music is very rooted with the music that I discovered in my early 20s.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'll get into that more when we get to that segment. But whereas I look at, those teenage years, those formative years, I look at that as more as like a prologue. But I love talking about all that stuff and looking back and reflecting on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really, those 2 reasons are really why I enjoy doing this more than anything else, personally.
Very nice, and thanks for the kind words. By the way, that was nice. I agree with all that what you said. You like especially chatting with you. I would say definitely you, and especially you and my brother-in-law Dan. I really have always enjoyed talking music with the most because there's always fun in it. When we were kids, we used to get a little heated about it, and we would get in like these big arguments and stuff. And that's kind of funny to look back on. Now it's like. It's just like, dude, you like what you like, I like what I like, and it's fun to disagree and joke around.
Sure.
But it's, the idea of doing the podcast, like when you initially kind of pitched the idea of doing it, I've already been doing, I'll shamelessly plug my gaming channel. I already do a gaming channel called Kuroda Kaisuki. So I tried to do a little bit of music content on there, and it just like didn't feel right and didn't really work. And I find discussing music's better than, like, when we do podcasts, it's way better than just, like, you or I talking into a camera. I like doing some of that stuff. It's fun, but the discussion's more fun. And so when you kind of initially, like, proposed that, obviously I'd already been doing YouTube. You also, I don't think you mentioned, but people should know, you have a little bit of a background doing college radio, and as a teacher, which I think has really helped a lot with... in terms of like whenever we, research for a show or what, you know what I mean, or even just the way you talk, and you're a bit more polished than I am. I've gotten slowly better just by doing YouTube like over and over and over. I kind of had to learn it the hard way, but where was I going with that? The point is that like obviously given our background, everything that you just said, and then just wanting that outlet for music, like kind of having the outlet for the gaming side of my obsession, but like not having that real outlet for music. The idea of having like our own platform where we could talk about our favorite music and, God forbid, discover a little bit of music. That's always exciting. Mm-hmm. Especially since I think there's a lot of ways our tastes have really diverted, even though like I think our taste in music has always done like sort of like this, where we like a DNA strand, right? But
I didn't know what that was.
Where it's like we cross paths and then we just go in completely different directions and then eventually circle back to, and it all goes back to I think talking about this history, and I think it's really important to talk about the history, is that our roots are the same. The roots are the same. So I can know, like, hearing something, I'm like, oh, Andrew would not like that, but he would like this. Or even if I heard a band that you didn't like, I'd be like, I bet you'd like this song, because it's just like we're pretty... I even noticed it specifically when we did the David Bowie discography series. I noticed there was a lot of songs... We had our differences for sure, but there were a lot of songs where it's like we'd see eye to eye on the same songs on the albums. Like, oh, that was in your top 3 favorite songs on the album too. So there'd be those certain qualities in music that I think we both appreciate. Again, we have our differences, but I think there are a lot of similarities, which is very interesting. There's enough similarities where it's not like we're talking to each other and it's like gobbledygook, but there's enough differences where it can be a fun, healthy debate, or a fun, or just a way of basically introducing each other to different music, which I think is probably the most fun thing of anything, is discovering new music.
I agree, and no way better to do that than in this format, just talking, right? Talking to another person. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I feel like, and why that is, to go off what you were saying with, knowing, I think you're going to like this versus not liking it, is even if we do have some individual differences and preferences, I feel like we look for the same thing.
Yes,
so what I mean by that is, one example is you and I both love when music is forward thinking. So we look for that in a lot of the music that we're listening to, or just if we're discovering something new. At least I know for myself that's something that's really important. We love things that are just a little outside of the box, that doesn't need those traditional top 40 cliches that you hear. This is what's popular in the moment type of thing. I know we both love songwriting. I think maybe I prioritize a little more of an emphasis on that than you do, but I know that that's something that's important that you look for as well too. It's something like instrumentation. I would say maybe you prioritize that a little more than I do.
Yeah.
But these are just common factors, common attributes in music that I think we both place an emphasis on.
Yeah. And
I think that's reflective on our tastes.
And music just being different. I don't like hearing the same crap all the time. Sure, everybody has some, like, you get into a certain wheelhouse of music. I still really love metal. There's a lot of metal to me that sounds derivative, but I like it anyway. But it's just, everybody's like that. Some people have those genres of music where, maybe there's certain artists that sound similar to each other, but you still like them just because it's what you like. But for the most part, I like if something sounds different, if something sounds new, or if something's, my favorite thing is finding something that is new and different, but I can hear the influences in other music, from other music. I'm like, oh, they're taken from this, and they're taken from this, and this is, and I would have never thought to do. Like, I love that kind of stuff.
You play a little bit of 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, right?
Yeah. On that note, do we have any final thoughts on the subject? Because we should move on.
No, I don't think so. I think this was awesome, and it just it just kind of encapsulates why I love doing this. You have me thinking about things just throughout the conversation.
Same. And that's what you can. So, and to sum it up before we get to our next segment, that's pretty much us. That's how this is like kind of our origins. This is what our goal is with the podcast, just to Talkin Muzak. Basically it. So if you like
music,
so hopefully you stick with us if you like what you're hearing. And for the next segment, we're gonna move on. Who doesn't love a good top 5, Andrew? Who doesn't?
Top 5. Who doesn't love a good top 5?
Like, the internet loves top 5s. We decided
a good top 5, and the fucking internet loves a good top 5.
Or a top 10. We don't have time for a top 10, but we'll do a top 5. So top 5, we decided, since again this is the first episode, get everybody to know us, all that stuff. What's our top 5 favorite albums? I'm going to shamelessly plug, we have done a podcast. We've only got the audio for the podcast of our top 10 favorite bands and artists, and I have a video that I've done both on this channel and on my other channel it was a crossover video I did of my top 10 favorite bands. You didn't do one, right? Did you do an individual one?
No, I didn't.
No, I didn't think you did. Okay, sorry.
I'm going to do one, though, because that one's outdated that we did together.
Yeah, so anyway, we've already discussed top 10 bands or whatever, so I'll link that somewhere here, or just check on our platforms, you'll find it. So this is, this is our top 5 albums. I have some props.
So do I.
Oh, beautiful. I have some props. So top 5 albums. What we're gonna do is, so did we decide we're gonna go from 5 down to 1, or is that how we want to do it?
Yeah, we could do. I think that's the best way to do. I know you said you didn't have an order, so whatever however you go about that. But yeah, I say we do reverse.
Okay, so we'll go from 5 to 1, and I guess explain what we'll very briefly explain why the album is in your top 5, all those things.
Awesome.
Would you like to go first, or would you like me to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
So this was prepping for this first episode. This was hands down probably my favorite exercise to really prepare. I mentioned just a little earlier that two epiphanies I had putting this top 5 together. Well, so I'll say this has probably been a consistent top 5 for a number of years now, but I did have 2 epiphanies. One, these are all 60s records.
Ooh, that's awesome.
So that's interesting.
I like that.
And 2, these records really are they really capture my 20s. These were all records that I really fell in love and discovered for the first time in my early to mid 20s. So it's one of those things where, this time 10 years from now, I wonder how different a top 5 could look like, if it's going to be a little more reflective with some of the records that are on heavier rotation for me now, or if it's going to be these 5. But these 5 I always go back to in one way or another, one of which I listened to earlier today. So just, having said all of that, I will say the notable exception is my number 5 and 4 do tend to flip-flop, and this is also kind of bring us into spoiler alert territory for if and when my top 10 of 1969 ever comes out, because these will be my 1 and 2 in those in that video, but that's all right. Maybe the order will change by then. But for today, I am going to put Miles Davis in a silent way. And I'll take it out of the plastic sleeve. Don't mind me here. All right. Miles Davis in a silent way. As mentioned before, Miles Davis discovered this record in my early 20s. This has always been my favorite Miles record. You can make the case as far as personal connections. I might have a deeper personal connection with Bitches Brew. I might even have a deeper connection with Kinda Blue. But the way I view this record is this one's mine. This one has always been mine. First and foremost, what should be noted about this record is that it was very much a transitional record for Miles. You had some leftover players from the second grade quintet, such as Herbie Hancock on electric piano, Tony Williams on drums, and the late great Wayne Shorter on saxophone. Now we bring in Chick Corea, electric piano player number 2, Joel Zenwall, electric piano player number 3, and the great John McLaughlin on guitar, electric guitar as well. Bitches Brew gets associated as the first fusion record, but it's actually this one right here in a silent way. But they're very different record. What draws me to this record is this record just has this atmospheric vibe to it. It's just one of those records where when I just need to clear my head, clear my mind, this is a go-to. And this is the record that I actually listened to just a couple hours before we recorded. And it's one that, on a minimum, I probably listen to once a month to this day.
Oh, wow.
It's a great rainy day record. We've had some rain up here, at least my neck of the woods. It's just a vibe. But it's also just so forward-thinking with the, this is one of the first records where there was tape manipulation, I could talk, and editing. The great Tio Macaro is a legend in of itself. He was one of Miles's many collaborators and producers. The playing is great. But what I love about it is it's just an easy record to listen to. Does Miles have more adventurous records than this? Yes. Does Miles have more groundbreaking records than this? Yes. But there's just always been something about this album that I've been drawn to. It's always been my favorite Miles record, and at this point, that will never change. Even if I listen to albums like On the Corner more and Bitches Brew more, it will always be in a silent way. A record that I think you would love, by the way.
Okay, unless you recommend it, maybe I'll listen to that tonight. I think you sold
You should
me on
listen
it.
to it regardless, but it's not my recommendation.
I will.
Today.
I'm gonna endeavor to listen to any of your top fives that I've not heard. So, because I feel like if records make a person's top five, that's a pretty big deal. You know, like that's you know what I mean. That's a pretty big deal, and I trust your opinion. My number five, I'm gonna try to keep it short. Is an album that a lot of these. I'm just gonna say a lot of these. I don't think any of these are really gonna surprise you, man. A lot of these are just. For me, it's always like those albums when you first discover music. Not that I don't hear amazing things, but I think I have such a longer history with those albums, and if they stick with me for this long, I feel like a loyalty to them. I don't know what it is, but anyway, this one is Tom Petty, Full Moon Fever. I should explain really quick before I get into this my approach to my top five. I almost forgot. I found this very, very difficult. I don't have like a definitive, like my top 100 albums. I don't have like a. Do you remember that guy Darth Carl from Rate Your Music?
Yeah.
You know, yeah. Anyway, shout out to you, Darth Carl, if you ever watched this. Stanley the Bugman on Rate Your Music. Yeah. Guy has amazing epic lists. He has like top 200 albums and bands and all this stuff. Anyway, I've had a really hard time with that. So what I decided to do was I decided to try to pick 5 albums that would encapsulate all like as many of the genres of music or the many styles of music as I can that I enjoy. So for Tom Petty kind of this, especially this album, this kind of hits the box for me with singer-songwriter, folk. It's got the classic rock thing. It's got the sort of for lack of a better term, soft rock, but not like crappy soft rock, like good, like kind of more mellow rock. Even like a
Heartland rock.
Yeah, Heartland rock kind of thing. Yeah, that faction of rock that I really enjoy. This is just a top to bottom amazing album, produced by Jeff Lynne.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's got the big hits, Free Fall and I Won't Back Down, but it's really, which I still love. I know those are overplayed songs. I still love those songs. I've never gotten tired of them. But it also has like A Face in the Crowd, You're So Bad. What do we got? Depending on You, All Right for Now. I mean, it's just like one of those albums where every song is great, and the entire album just flows just so smoothly from top to bottom. I can't say enough. The songwriting's great. I mean, this is considered a Tom Petty solo album, but I'm pretty sure all the Heartbreakers play on it, so it might as well be Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. And something like Damn the Torpedoes is probably it's probably considered a better album, or even Wildflowers. This was an album my dad got me for Christmas first year after I got into music. Oh, gotta pause. Cut. I'm crappier quality because my camera died. So anyway. So yeah, I don't know what else to say about this album. Love this album. Love Tom Petty. Rest in peace. One of those albums that this kind of was probably the album that got me into sort of singer-songwriters and that kind of thing. And eventually it would evolve into liking guys like Bob Dylan and Nick Drake and insert your favorite folk artist here. So there you go. Tom Petty, Full Moon Fever.
Good record. I know that you're a big Tom Petty fan, of course, but I didn't realize that would be a top 5 pick.
Oh, yeah.
Is that the one that has his cover of I Feel a Whole Lot Better by the Byrds?
Yes.
Yes, it's a good cover.
I highly recommend the album. It's very good.
Yeah, it's a good album. I would say probably is Wildflowers after
Wildflowers,
Full Moon?
yep.
Wildflowers.
No, you know what? It's either... Yeah, I don't know if it's Full Moon Fever and then Wildflowers, or Full Moon Fever and then Into the Great Wide Open. Those 3 albums are in there somewhere. Into the Great Wide Open might be after Full Moon Fever, but I'm not sure. So
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, that's my favorite Tom Petty album.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on to my number 4. This would be my other 1969 pick. Like I said, In a Silent Way and this record do tend to flip-flop. But that's going to be the third and self-titled record by the Velvet Underground. We have another copy right here.
Oh, wow.
Mix. I have actually all of these records in my top 5. I have multiple copies, both on vinyl and CD. A couple I own digitally. It's it's madness. Box sets, you name it. But anyways, this record, like In a Silent Way, this has always been my favorite Velvet record. The Velvet Underground and Nico may have been one of those formative records that just introduced me to what rock and roll could really be, and that there literally was not any rules and everything was fair game. And their sophomore release, White Heat, kind of further pushed that idea. But then they lose John Cale, and they just really kind of strip things back. This is just such a tender sounding record. In many ways a vibe record, just like In a Silent Way.
I love your vibe.
This is the record that really showcases Lou Reed as a songwriter. And Lou is one of those guys, kind of like Bob Dylan, John Prine, Tom Waits. These guys that, from a technicality point, are not good singers, but they're my kind of singers. They sing from the heart. They really sell what it is they're telling you. You can really just feel the emotion that they're feeling, and it's just, I just connect with that more personally. But this record, just from start to finish, I mean, you, with the opening track, Candy Says, from a social standpoint, way ahead of its time. It's about a transgender man that is just not happy with what he sees in the mirror, isn't happy with his body, and it's one of those songs that really all of us can relate to. You know, as a teenager, we all kind of go through that, like, ugh, look at yourself in the mirror. And I love songs like that. You got What Goes On, the Rocker, it's just really killer organ throughout. They go 10, 15 minutes when they play this one live. Pale Blue Eyes is one of my favorite songs of all time. It was when we all went through that dorky phase of posting lyrics on Facebook to our loved ones. Pale Blue Eyes was the first song I quoted.
Nice.
For Cats when we first started singing. You have the song Jesus, which is a beautiful ballad. Side 2 opens up at Beginning to See the Light. I love the build-up at the end. It's such a simple 4-chord progression song, but that build-up at the end where the rest of the band backs Lou up vocally, and it just has this like gospel feeling to it. Just so good. Just the climax to that song is wonderful. I'm Set Free is a beautiful song. The only caveat that I have with this record is there's a song called The Murder Mystery. Very much in the vein of some of the more avant-garde stuff they did on the previous records. It's a neat track. It's just out of place here. But we make up with our closer, After Hours, which is sung by the drummer Mo Tucker, who also just cannot sing. But her performance, there's just something about it. And that's a whole story in of itself. But this record, it's another one that's just always meant so much to me. I still listen to it regularly to this day. So much so I have different mixes. This is what's called the closet mix that just really just amps up the vocals, and it almost feels like the band is performing to you in a closet. Like, that's what it sounds like. Yeah. So you get a little bit, of a different vibe with that mix versus this one. I would say probably the stereo is the definitive version in most cases, but it's just one of those records that, like I said, it means so much to me. It comes down to the songwriting above all else, and it's their most democratic album up to this point as well, too. You're having contributions from Sterling Morrison, newcomer Doug Yule, and I just can't recommend it enough. This is a proto-indie rock right here.
Nice.
In my number 4.
Nice. So, my number 4, I guess, is, gotta rep the metal side of things. Black Sabbath, Heaven and Hell. My favorites, it's hard with Sabbath, because Sabbath is several bands in one, based on the singer, I think. If I were to say, like, overall, what my favorite Sabbath album, it's between this and Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. I thought about actually putting Sabbath Bloody Sabbath here instead. I chose Heaven and Hell because of Ronnie, and obviously I've said this before, Ronnie James Dio's my favorite singer. And, you know, I mean, really, this is, again, another album where song for song, it's just solid. Like, there isn't a weak track on this album. I mean, Heaven and Hell, Die Young, Neon Nights, you know, from that like killer opening, like, okay, you knew as soon as Neon Nights starts, you know, it's like, holy, they're not fucking around, you know. Probably my favorite heavy metal album right here, to be honest. Black Sabbath's the best heavy metal band. I still love heavy metal. I love hard rock a lot, and over the years, I have to say, this is the Sabbath period with Dio is probably my favorite stuff that he's done, even over the Rainbow stuff, as much of a Rainbow fan as I am. But everything about this, I mean, everything is amped up. You know, the band was basically dead at this point. Ozzy was out. The rest of them had bad drug problems. Goes to show how bad Ozzy's drug problems were if they kicked him out when like they were bad cocaine addicts and heroin addicts and all this stuff. So but I mean, as soon as they brought Ronnie in, you had that totally different vocal style, which really amped up the musicianship, in my opinion. Some people may say that isn't necessarily make it better. I don't know if I agree with that or not. Although, I mean, to be honest, even the musicianship on like Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, Sabotage, Technical Ecstasy, even like some of that musicianship's amazing too. So. But anyway, my point is, this checks all the boxes for me in the hard rock, heavy metal world, and has the bonus of having my favorite singer on it. So, Black Sabbath, Heaven and Hell. Love it. I'm sure you're shocked that was on here.
Well, no, I was gonna say. I mean, I'm well aware how big of a both Dio fan and Sabbath fan you are, and
yeah.
I was definitely anticipating a Sabbath record in your top 5. For some reason, I did not see that pick coming.
Yeah, I mean, it's got the song "Heaven and Hell" on it. You know, I mean, that is one of the greatest heavy metal songs I think ever written. But that's my opinion. That's one man's opinion.
That's definitely my favorite Dio Sabbath record.
Yeah.
Not sure where I would place it necessarily in a Sabbath ranking. Maybe that's a video for another time. But I am somewhat surprised by that pick. But all right.
I already see what you got there, and I'm not surprised. Go ahead.
Yeah, this should be no surprise. I could breeze through this one a little quicker. I've talked about it on here before. This was my number 1 pick for my favorite record released in 1965. It's my favorite jazz album of all time, and it's my 3rd favorite album of all time. John Coltrane's "A Love Supreme." I mean,
great album.
I don't really know what else to say that I haven't said. Other people that have said better than me already. Just that, like the rest of these records, how much it means to me. This was really my gateway into jazz. Jazz is probably my favorite genre of music.
I was about to ask you that, actually, if you thought jazz at this point was your favorite.
I definitely listen to rock more, but jazz is my favorite genre of music, without a doubt. And what I love about this record the most is it's the closest. It's 2 things. It's the closest that I can identify with religion on a spiritual level, because this is essentially, this piece, "A Love Supreme," is really just him telling you his love for God. And, you know, maybe Coltrane is the one that's going to convince me one day. I don't know. But I really just have this spiritual connection to this record. But the other thing is, I was so proud when I used to teach, we did Black History Month, and I got to choose for my coworkers. So, you know, of course, I chose music. And I chose to represent John Coltrane. And a challenge that I welcomed for myself was trying to get 3rd graders into this music. So I incorporated this record, several other Coltrane pieces, and just being able to successfully draw a new generation to this old music, and them being able to tie it back to their parents' music, the music that they listened to, but also to connect with it on an emotional level, how it made them feel, is probably one of the top 5 proudest things I've ever done in my life. And so that just brought a whole new meaning to this record for me
Nice.
that I already had prior. So, Love Supreme, it's my number 3. It's a masterpiece. I own it in several formats as well.
It's supremely good.
It is supremely
that is a very good record. I listened to that a few times, and I really enjoyed it. So I'd like to get more into jazz. It's just something that I have not dove into. Like hip hop, it's taken me a long time for some reason. But
folks, what do you think? Future video segment, I introduced Rob to jazz in 5 albums.
Yeah, I think that I've thought about that or punk because as you know, I'm not a punk fan. One of those two. You probably could help me with either of those. So we'll see.
Well, you heard it, folks. Future videos right there.
I think there's more hope for jazz, to be honest.
Fair enough.
Speaking of jazz, I mean, this isn't jazz, but I certainly was influenced by it. I've got to, as you know, Andy, and as the viewers who do know me, and for those who don't know will know, I am an enormous prog rock fan. I can't get enough of it. Been a fan since forever. I think you know what's coming. Close to the Edge, yes. I mean, there is. I mean, it is really the quintessential prog rock album. I don't know what else to say about it. What is so great about Close to the Edge, and aside from this magnificent gatefold sleeve, oh, tell me you're busting it out, beautiful. I think what's so great about Close to the Edge is that is it grandiose like most prog rock? Of course. Are the songs more than a little too long? Beautiful. We're matching. Great. But are the songs all more than a little too long? Of course. But this is super accessible, in my opinion, for progressive rock because the melodies are still there. The songwriting is still there. It's atmospheric, but it's also catchy. It's you know. Do you know a catchier 20-minute song than Close to the Edge? Close to the edge, down by the river. I would
say the closest is Supper's Ready by Genesis.
Yeah, the closest is. I think Close to the Edge is better, just because
Agreed.
It's so well put together, and I feel like Yes really could. Sorry, especially to our buddy Matt who loves Yes and any other Yes fan. I feel like Yes could have called it quits after this album. They really peaked. Like I see why Bill Bruford left afterward. He was like, "No, I did it. I'm maxed out on Yes. We did it." With Close to the Edge, they really did. Song like "And You and I," super super meaningful to me. It's actually is a love song, and I associate with my wife because she always associated with me because I introduced her to this album, and it is a love song. Siberian Cat. I mean the whole thing. I mean, best lineup of Yes. The songs don't feel as long as they are. When Close to the Edge is done, I'm like, that was 20 minutes? It felt like it was 5, So I don't know. I can't really say. I think this is really probably the best thing, arguably, the best album, arguably, that came out of progressive rock. As a massive progressive rock fan. And Yes isn't even my favorite band, really. I mean, they'd actually go pretty far down the totem pole in terms of, progressive rock bands. But there's just something about this album. And I would say Fragile as well in the Yes album, but this is where they peaked. Just, yeah, I don't know what else to say. I really love Close to the Edge.
You said it very well. I 100% verbatim agree with everything you said. Yes is nowhere near amongst one of my favorite bands, but that album is a top 20 album of all time.
Yeah, it's so good.
And it's my favorite progressive rock album too. So I mean that record really is. It's lightning in a bottle.
Really. Yeah, totally agree.
For sure. Yeah. All right, cool. So my number 2 is the Beatles' White Album.
Nice.
Another interesting relationship with this record. So I mentioned before, the Beatles, they're now my favorite band. They've been my favorite band for many years now, but that took till really my mid-20s. And, I've had different favorite Beatle records before. At one point it was Abbey Road. At one point it was Sgt. Pepper. There are days I sometimes wonder if it's Revolver. I probably listen to that one more. But this is the one that I always go back to. And it actually started when Giles Martin put out the 2018 remix. I've been pretty vocal about the remixes that he's done over the years with some of the latter day Beatle records, but his remix of the White Album was just a game changer for me. For a record that I loved already, he just totally enhanced it to a whole new level, bringing out some of the, mixing and songs like Long, 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 for instance, which were just so, buried in the mix. And, I mean, I don't want to go on about mixing too much, but he just really, really transformed this record for me. I was that guy for years. I would sequence my own White Album version down to one disc, two sides. But I've listened to this record so much over the years that I love it for its imperfections. That's what I love about this record. It's because by all means it's not a perfect record. But, I mean, when you have the streak of While My Guitar Gently Weeps, Happiness is a Warm Gun, Martha, My Dear, I'm So Tired, Blackbird, just those songs alone are better than most artists' entire discography. But then you get something like Piggies that I just as much look forward to. It's like, I need a break from that stretch of the best 6 pop songs ever. I just have so many memories attached, all those car rides of listening to this record, with Cass singing along to these songs from when I used to be a teacher and would do spelling tests, and every time we got to number 9, I would go number 9, number 9, number 9, and it drove those kids crazy, but then the one time I didn't do it, they were like, what about number 9? A song like Birthday, which is just a throwaway for anyone else. Whenever it's someone's birthday, I'll just text them that song. There's just so many cheesy
great
associations that I have with this record, but this just captures everything, in my opinion, that makes the Beatles so great. It's my second favorite album of all time.
Keep that up.
The Beatles White Album.
Keep holding that up. My number 2 is Abbey Road. So, look, the White Album is very good. Okay, I famously my hang up is with the White Album is, I've said this to you, and the viewers will know this about me. I am not a fan of double albums. That's a discussion for a whole different video. It's too much. That bottom line for me, it's too much. The White Album is amazing. I will say it's one of the best double albums, but that's like, it's, to me, it's like, well, I'm not a double album person. Abbey Road, this is my dad's. This was his picture disc from way back in the day. Unfortunately, it's broken, but it's the only vinyl copy I've got right now. I think Rachel's got one, but I didn't feel like digging it out. So Abbey Road, I mean, yeah, pretty much echo the same thing you said about the White Album, but Abbey Road. It was my dad, I think I mentioned, always would play the Beatles. I remember as a kid watching the Yellow Submarine movie and stuff, and there were songs that clicked and stuff. This was the album where I went, the Beatles are amazing. Like the entire, like the whole album. I'll say, Come Together has soured on me slightly over the years. I'm coming back to it, but for a while there, I kind of couldn't hear it very much, especially because the radio used to always play the Aerosmith version, which I love Aerosmith, but I don't really like their version.
I don't either.
So anyway, my point is like, yeah, top to bottom, I mean, I love everything. Maxwell's Silver Hammer, Octopus's Garden, everything from that.
Octopus's Garden.
So good. But like something like I Want You, She's So Heavy. I mean, that is such an amazing song. That whole suite, she came in through the bathroom window. What is it? Mean Mr. Mustard, Golden Slumbers, that whole thing. I love that whole end of the record there, that whole side of the record.
Sun King.
Yep, Sun King. McCartney, when I saw him live, played that whole thing. He played it in 2 sections, but they played it, and I just loved every minute of it. Yeah, to me this is far and away the Beatles' best album. I think you can make a case for the White Album for sure. You can make a case for Sgt. Pepper, really any of them, but this has always been the one to me I can put on any time. It's a top to bottom record. Genuinely, like I said, I was having a hard time picking my top 5. Close to the Edge may, for example, be it's probably top 10. It may be number 7 in actual fact if I went, if I didn't have this sort of caveat to my list. I think Abbey Road's probably number 2. Genuinely my number 2 favorite album. It's just a perfect, again, and it fits, going back to what I was saying with each album being representative of a kind of thing. This again goes in the songwriter category. It checks so many boxes. I mean, there's still some psychedelia in this a little bit. There's the folk thing in there. I mean, there's the classic rock aspect. There's the pop. I mean, this fulfills, to me, this might be the greatest pop record of all time. Yeah, probably. So, I don't know. Abbey Road.
You can't. It's one you can't go wrong with, and like Miles Davis, I was saying, attachments to some of his other records, despite having the one pick. I mean, that applies to the Beatles for me. Everything else, from Revolver on, I mean, any of those, you can make an argument for being the best, your favorite Beatles record, however you may, feel, and Abbey Road is no exception to that.
Yeah, and I'd add Rubber Soul, actually. I'd say Rubber Soul on. Rubber Soul's...
I would tackle
Rubber Soul is amazing.
Yeah. Hey, man, that's awesome. So we both have Beatles records as our definitive second favorite albums of all time.
Have to. They're the Beatles, man.
Yeah, man. So my number 1, you and I have done a video together. It was also my number 1 for favorite record released in
I'll hold my number 1 up too.
There you go. Might as well, right?
See our video for more details. We'll shamelessly plug. We did a video called our number 1 favorite albums of all time, and we talked about these 2 albums.
Yeah, it's the only thing I will add that I maybe didn't make clear enough in the video prior is, and I remember you said this about Dark Side, is that you treat yourself to it.
Yes.
I would say I treat myself to this, but I also go to it when I need it. I just got married a few months ago. Needless to say, was a nervous wreck building up to that. And I listened to this on vinyl 2 days prior, and then the morning of, as I was getting ready, I just had this on the background. And I'm telling you, the way this record makes me feel every time I listen to it, not only is it like listening to it for the first time all over again, but I just come out of it like, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. And I don't think I would have successfully gotten through my wedding day had I not pre-gamed myself listening to this wonderful record. It's a concept album in the sense that this is life. This is growing up. That's what this record means to me when I listen to it. So there is nothing more fitting than spinning it on that day. And yeah, I mean, my wife and I bond over it. It's the greatest 33 minutes that you'll ever listen to.
Except for the first 33 minutes of this album, Dark Side of the Moon.
Wrong.
I'm just kidding. Well, actually, I'm not. I'm not, because that is my opinion. But no, Pet Sounds is really great too. Yeah, Dark Side. Yeah, see that video for my in-depth thoughts. But like as I said earlier in this episode, I mean, it was the album that got me into music. I mean, the moment my dad said put Dark Side of the Moon on, it was just a game changer for me. My dad has passed away as of about a year ago, so it has that sort of emotional weight to it. But even I explained a lot even in that video we did, and this was before my dad passed away, that it means so much more to me than that. Just like, I mean, it got me into music. Pink Floyd has always been my favorite band, and I think will always be my favorite band. And this period, I mean, I'd say from to me, I like all their stuff. There's weaker periods, but Dark Side, Wish You Were Here, Animals, the Metal, The Wall. I love Adam Hart Mother. I love the early stuff like Piper and Saucerful. I mean, even the later stuff I like. So I mean, but as far as I'm concerned, this is the perfect culmination of, a kind of echo Close to the Edge. This is kind of what happened with Pink Floyd. I think this was the perfect culmination of what they were striving for up to this point, Only with Pink Floyd, I think it lasted longer than one album because we got Wish You Were Here, and then we got Animals, and yeah, probably The Wall too. But again, the double album thing. But yeah, Dark Side of the Moon, my favorite album of all time.
Nice. Didn't see that one coming.
No, not at all. I didn't see Pet Sounds coming. Okay, so for our final segment, it's the album swap. Would you like to really quickly just explain what the album swap is, and then I guess I'll explain what our topic is for today?
Yeah, so the album swap was one that we alluded to at the top of the episode that will probably be one that we do periodically. And so how the setup is going to work is we'll have different themes for each time. So today's theme is really just going to be a record that we know. We're talking about how we know each other's musical tastes very well. A record that we know the other person would really love, but just has not listened to yet themselves.
Yeah.
And so we'll kind of just give a brief overview, why we picked it, vice versa, and then we will open with the final results next episode.
That's a great idea. So I love the idea of opening the next episode with that. So tune in for the next episode to hear what each of our thoughts are on the albums that we picked for each other. So do you want to reveal your pick for me first, or do you want me to reveal my pick for you first?
Since I did the top 5 first, you reveal your choice.
Happy to. I've talked about this album with you quite a bit, or at least this band with you a little bit. You might not even be surprised. I think you're gonna really like this. I did have a hard time thinking of. I think I had a hard time thinking of stuff that you haven't listened to. I'm pretty sure you haven't listened to this. Gentle Giant, Octopus. So, I thought originally for you, for this band, I would recommend maybe a little bit later period, maybe like Power and the Glory, Free Hand, something like that, when they became a bit more concise, I guess you would say, although it's hard to call Gentle Giant that. But this is the album, and also, by the way, caveat to this, you must listen to the Steven Wilson remix.
Good to know.
I will not accept anything else. So, the reason I picked Octopus is because I've been listening to it a bit lately, and it's their most musically inventive album. It's their most unique album, in my opinion. The music is so complex and so interesting and so different, yet it's done in a very concise way where it's still... Gentle Giant doesn't do long pieces. They don't do a Close to the Edge. They don't do a Supper's Ready. They don't do a Plague of Lighthouse Keepers. They don't do 20-minute epics. They do like a 20-minute song in 5 minutes. So they have all those complexities, those layers, they have many different instruments going on, all kinds of like interesting weird melodies and stuff. This album sometimes gets chaotic, but it's you name any subgenre, they shove it in here. Free jazz, blues rock, like a cappella, like classical, funk. I mean, you name it, it's on this record. And at the same time, I think a lot of the tunes are really catchy. So I think you'll enjoy the complexity of this record, but I feel like you won't be overwhelmed with like, oh god, I'm gonna have to listen to like a 20-minute side or something. You know, it's about a 40-minute album, and each of the songs are quite different, but it's still Gentle Giant. So my choice for you is Octopus by Gentle Giant.
Nice. Okay, I'm actually really looking forward to that.
My favorite Gentle Giant album, by the way. So
that is your favorite.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. The album that got me into them.
We've been talking about them, and they have been a band that's been on my radar for quite some time. So now you've given me a reason to check it out. So you gave me an exciting. Looking forward to it.
Cool.
Nice. All right. So kind of similar. I have for years been really nagging you to check this artist out.
Nice.
This record specifically. I think it's just a great way to get into this artist. For you, for reasons I'll quickly get into in a second, this has been a no-brainer, and it's all the more reason, like, why haven't you listened to this yet? Hounds of Love by Kate Bush.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm looking forward to this too. I've honestly been meaning to listen to her. So, okay.
This is not a prog record per se. I would put this more maybe art pop, prog pop, but boy, does it share a lot of similarities with progressive rock music, specifically with Peter Gabriel, who she rather has collaborated with. I think she's on Games Without Frontiers, Don't Give Up. There might be one or two other tracks. She was discovered by David Gilmour initially.
That I knew, yep.
So we have him to thank, really, for Kate Bush. But this record, so for starters, it's broken up to Hounds of Love is side 1, and the Ninth Wave is side 2. Side 1 just has the 5 greatest pop songs you will ever hear. It is as innovative and as forward-thinking as pop music can be. With the title track, which has kind of made a comeback with Stranger Things, from The Big Sky, Mother Stands for Comfort, Cloud Busting. I mean, side 1 alone, that's going to be the hook to draw you in. But it's the Ninth Wave of side 2. Is one piece that is broken into several tracks. This is the closest that Kate Bush ever got to prog, and it's just, if I wanted to cheat, I would say it's my second favorite prog song of all time.
Right, okay.
Close to the Edge by Yes. If you like Peter Gabriel 3 era Peter Gabriel, you are going to love this. But above all else, you are going to just love the production and just the atmosphere of this record.
Cool.
Very heavy on keyboard, but just I don't know, man. This is just the screams Rob Curran.
I don't. I'll be honest. I don't know. I don't know why I haven't checked her out. She's been on my radar forever, and it's like, you know, I love like aside from my love of progressive rock. I mean, I think in many ways art rock, like that '80s art rock scene, like you were mentioning Peter Gabriel and some of the stuff that was going on in the early '80s, there, kind of is like they basically the spawn of prog in the 80s, I think, because it's complex music in a pop format. Same thing like Talking Heads did, you know, a group like Japan. I mean, you name any of those like early art rock 80s. I love that scene. I really do. I don't know why I haven't looked into Kate Bush. It's a glaring like
and this is
omission.
Similar
so I'm excited.
In that vein,
yeah.
Accessible music that sort of meets those criteria that you and I really look for a lot. I was almost tempted to recommend the album before this one, The Dreaming. I think if you get into this, I could see The Dreaming becoming your favorite by her, but that one takes time, whereas this one's a lot easier to dive into, and that's including that Ninth Wave, like I said. So I really can't wait to.
She just got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, didn't she?
Yeah, finally.
Yeah. She's probably been eligible for 30 years or something. It's like, how?
Oh, yeah.
How is this just happening?
And honestly, it's because of the Stranger Things comeback with Running Up That Hill, like I said, which is really cool how they use that song on the show. But that's literally the reason
I'm honestly
really
looking forward to it. I've been meaning to look into her forever, so good suggestion. Should we be listening to this, like, what would you say, 3 to 5 times maybe? I think I'd need at least 3 listens to have like a proper judgment on an album, maybe 5 at most. So okay, 3 to 5 times. Make sure
you listen to the remaster, which I believe is on streaming.
Okay, I'll have a look at it. It should be on Spotify. And okay,
yes, it is.
I think that's the end of our first episode, dude. Tune in next time, guys.
Awesome. Yes.
If you liked what you saw, we are, as of the recording of this, we have a Twitter, which I'll have linked definitely on our YouTube page if I can on the podcast. We're on all the major podcast platforms, Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, you name it. And we're also obviously on YouTube, so if you want to watch the video side of this, it's all on YouTube with hopefully some flashy graphics and stuff that I edit and post. And in terms of the next episode, I would say about a month or so from the posting of this, expect the next episode. Maybe we will announce when we'll be, like, a ballpark on social media when we'll be recording the next episode. So
that's the plan, and definitely we are working on. We should, by the time this one's out, we should have a Facebook and Instagram up as well too. So
yeah, so please follow us, like us, all that stuff, and yeah, subscribe on YouTube, whatever. And I got nothing else to say, Andy. This was a great first episode.
Likewise, watch the other videos. Be on the lookout for my Journey of Muzak series. Be on the lookout for episode 2. But
till next time, guys. Peace.
Peace.
Beautiful.